Western Port region is located in southern Victoria and covers the local government areas of Bass Coast, Cardinia, Casey, Frankston and Mornington Peninsula. These councils form the Western Port Greenhouse Alliance, which undertakes projects to assist local governments and the community within the region respond to climate change. The impacts of climate change on settlements in the Western Port region project was undertaken by the Western Port Greenhouse Alliance, with support from the Australian Government Department of Climate Change and the Victorian Department of Sustainability and Environment. This project provides a comprehensive picture of projected climate impacts on the region's built environment and community and suggests local adaptation responses to those impacts. CSIRO was involved in developing regional climate projections for the area, and Marsden Jacob Associates assessed the social and economic implications of the impacts.
Over the past few years, I've had the pleasure to be involved in at least 2 major projects working with local government to help them build their understanding and capacity about climate change. The first example comes from Western Port in Victoria, which is an excellent example of how federal government, state government, and local government could all come together and work in collaboration with researchers and other stakeholders to undertake a climate change assessment.
We conducted the Impacts and Adaptation project in conjunction with our councils which face onto Western Port, so we could take the global phenomenon and look at it at a local level. That's the level at which people are living and at the level at which they can respond.
So in that particular project, we drew from a team of climate change experts and modelers who gave us an understanding and a vision of the future climate for the Western Port region. We then took that information, combined it with information about assets and infrastructure on the ground of interest to local government, and essentially tried to estimate what assets and infrastructure might be exposed in a changing climate, and actually put some dollar values on that information to give some sense of scale of the impacts. Subsequent to that, we undertook a number of workshopping exercises to prioritize risk and consequences, and also to plan adaptation strategies that local governments could implement themselves or could implement in partnership with other levels of government.
The study finds that around 18,000 properties with a value of almost $2 billion are currently vulnerable to flood events, and more than 73,000 people and 35,000 properties are currently in bushfire-prone areas.
The City of Casey faces some very enormous challenges in regard to planning for the future, in regard to sea level rise, storm surge, high temperatures. Well, the community are asking us what's happening in their local area in regard to climate change. They want to be informed at all times, and they want to work with their local government to plan for the future. Through the project, we've identified that we have one of the largest elderly populations in Australia, and one of our challenges is to help them cope with the extreme temperatures.
So in the Western Port project, we did take a regional approach, working with multiple local governments in the Western Port region. And this type of approach to the problem, I think, is actually essential to getting good results. As a researcher, obviously we're quite limited. We can't go to all of the approximately 600 local government areas in Australia and undertake a detailed assessment. So there's some economies of scale that emerge by local governments banding together, forming these partnerships, identifying experts that can work with them to undertake these assessments. One of the concerns that I have is that although there's a wide variety of adaptation planning going on and quite a number of adaptation plans being produced, obviously there's some concern that these plans might just ultimately sit on a shelf and collect dust. And at the end of the day, that will provide no benefit to anyone. So to overcome that, we have to make sure that as we go about undertaking our adaptation planning, that there's a pathway by which that planning gets translated into action. And doing that requires overcoming a number of barriers. What we often see in some of our studies is a silo effect in local government, whereby climate change is relegated to an environmental department or an environmental officer, instead of being shared across the entire local government spectrum of operations, so engineering, management, community services. So that's a type of cultural barrier that also has to be overcome.
In response to these impacts, the City of Casey has begun implementing a number of actions, including educational materials summarising impacts and projections, and revising internal structures within Council.
project's generated considerable interest within council and across the community. The City of Casey has set up a climate change task force to include representation right across council. So we've had the council's climate change task force attend briefings so that they can have a full understanding of what the project is telling us, and then they can work out their own responses to make sure the community care, support, all the other services for which council is responsible are going to be delivered.
The Climate Change Task Force will develop climate change action plans and facilitate a community and council staff education and engagement program.
I think it's extremely important that all levels of government work together. The local people want to work with their local council, who needs to understand and work with the state government, and needs the initiative of the federal government to support them.
This Impacts and Adaptations project was very important for the City of Casey and the other councils that comprise the Western Port Greenhouse Alliance.
Casey's been very pleased to be involved in this project because we believe it's given us the edge, because we have some unique areas that we really need to address with our communities.
It's not just about making projections about the future, it's about how you work together to achieve results.
This study highlights the need for collaboration and early action on climate change to limit future social and economic costs. It highlights that local governments recognise that more work is needed on current planning policies, legislation and decision-making processes to keep pace with our emerging understanding of climate change. It also provides the information that governments and communities need to start protecting regional economies, infrastructure, housing and people's lifestyles.